Right, good afternoon everybody. Thank you for coming on to today's meeting of the Planning Applications Committee. If I can go straight on to the agenda. Item number 1 is the evacuation procedure. We're not expecting any alarms to go off, so if they do go off, we'll treat them for real. And if you can leave this room, there's only the one door out of this room. So out of that and down the front steps of the town hall and meet across by the Yorkshire Bank. Hopefully, because of the weather, we won't have to do that. It's also a good time to remind people to put their phones onto silent or to switch them off. And just to say to people as well, as is normally the case, the meeting will be recorded and put out onto YouTube within the next couple of days. Good job I said that, I reminded myself. Item number 2 is to receive apologies for absence.
Councillor Ponder, substituted by Councillor Evans.
Okay. I had apologies from Councillor Shepherd. Okay. Item 3 is to confirm the minutes held on the 21st of May. Are you happy that I sign those?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Item number 4 is to receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary and other interests in accordance with the Members' Code of Conduct if they're not already listed on the list that we have on the agenda. Yeah, Councillor Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
Obviously, as a substitute, mine aren't listed, so I'd just like to refer members to mine, which can be found in my register of interest. Thank you.
Right, okay. Item number 5, are any declarations of contact that members may have had from other people? No? In that case, it takes us on to item number 6, applications where people have indicated a wish to speak. I can just run through that for everybody to do that. If the officers will present the report. Following on from that, we'll call the speakers. As a speaker, and under the Constitution, you're allowed 3 minutes. I'll be strict on that 3 minutes. When the egg timer goes off, I will stop you. That's just so that it's fair to everybody that is to speak. Following on from that, if the officers have got any comments to make from that, they'll do so. Sorry, I should have also said that after you've spoken, members have the opportunity to ask for any points of clarification. It will only be to clarify anything that you've said during those 3 minutes. And then once something's been moved and seconded, the committee will debate the item and hopefully reach a decision. We normally reach a decision on the day, but occasionally we defer things for site visits or to get other information. But hopefully we make a decision on the day. Okay, so we can move on to item number 2 then, please, which we've got speakers down for, which is Prince's Avenue.
Thank you, Chair. This application is a variation of condition application, which seeks changes to a condition attached to a previously approved permission. In this case, condition 5 of permission 035135, which is worded to control the hours of operation for the pharmacy. As members will likely recall, this application was presented to committee on the 30th of April. However, it was noted that the hours applied for did not add up to a total of 100, which was the main reason for the extended hours. The application has now been amended to add 2 hours more per week and thus increase it to a total of 100 hours per week. The hours proposed are now 7 AM to 10 PM Monday to Saturday and 10 AM to 8 PM Sundays and bank holidays and public holidays. Here is the proposed condition next to the existing condition. As you can see, it would result in 1 extra hour per day with the use starting from 7 AM and 2 extra hours on Sundays with the use ceasing at 8 PM. So it is intended for the condition to read, the A1 use pharmacy shall not operate other than between the hours of 7 AM and 10 PM Monday to Saturday and between 10 AM and 8 PM Sundays and bank/public holidays. As part of the application, environmental health were consulted, along with Warwickshire Police and Warwickshire County Council Highways, all of which returned no objections to the scheme. In regard to amenity, although there will be a small increase above the times previously permitted, this would only be 1 hour per weekday and 2 hours on Sundays. This is considered not to cause any significant harm to the residential amenity of nearby residents. The proposal is therefore recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out on the agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Darren.
Just go back.
Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I'm just looking, can you just, sorry Chair, can you just reaffirm what the hours on Sunday would be? Because it doesn't mention Sunday.
Just pop it right up.
Yeah, I've got it. It's up there.
Sorry, now. Right. 8 AM and 10 AM and 8 PM on Sunday rather than 10 till 6. Right. This obviously, application, I've been asked by residents obviously to come here yet again because this first application I believe came to us on December 2017, and the committee in their wisdom at that particular time put in the conditions as they stand at the present moment in time. Residents are asking for those conditions to be upheld at the present moment in time, as the pharmacy isn't even open since 2017, when the original planning application went in and the original conditions were set. The pharmacy at the present moment in time operates from 9 o'clock in the morning. Although there's been no objections from environmental health, highways, etc., that's probably because there is no evidence there at the present moment in time to suggest why it couldn't open at 7 o'clock in the morning. Residents feel that it's unfair that this is the third time of being here, right, to have the hours yet again extended for a premises that isn't even open, with no evidence at all that it would be beneficial to residents for the conditions to be changed at this present moment in time. That is basically it. You know, I am asking on behalf of the residents for this planning committee to uphold the conditions that were set in 2017, where there has been no evidence at all to changing those conditions. We might have a completely different situation whereby in the future opening from the original conditioned hours, right, might not prove an issue at all, and the residents would be very happy with another hour in the morning. But until that time, I don't think there's any reason at all why conditions should be changed. That's basically it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any points of clarification? Councillor Beaumont.
The question I have is, it relates almost to the other meeting, you know, the meeting before this when we considered it. And I don't think we really explored why.
Sorry, is it a point of clarification?
Well, it is, because as I understand it, there's a contract for 100 hours operation a week. And if the contract says that, then he's breaching the contract if the premises are not available for those times. And what I think we maybe didn't explore...
Councillor Beaumont, it needs to be something...
Well, I'm just asking Councillor Neil, because he's representing residents, and I presume they've explored this, and that he'd be able to give me an answer. As I understood it, it was to service the needs of people who deliver care and support to people in their homes. And it could be that the out of hours issues are relating to the type of service that this pharmacy will be providing. Has that been made clear to you in any way?
No, it hasn't. In fact, councillor, it's been the opposite way round, whereby residents feel that the pharmacy does not have to be open 100 hours a week. Right, I would ask, and that's another point, Chair, that could bring up in the fact that has the committee itself seen any proof at all of the contract where it needs to be open 100 hours?
Hang on.
I just wanted to clarify something.
I've got you down.
Oh.
I've got you down. Right. As far as I'm aware, the applicant hasn't provided any contractual evidence. Councillor Sargent.
Did you say that the pharmacy is not open?
The pharmacy on Princes Avenue is not open.
Alright.
Since the original planning application went in December 2017, at this present moment in time it is still not open.
Has it ever been a pharmacy?
It has never been a pharmacy. It was an old car showroom way back in, 20 years ago, that became derelict. Don't get me wrong, they have done a good job on the house, etc. The other thing the residents are concerned about, that the planning application also had car parking in for 5 places at the back, and I believe now, again, that needs clarifying, Chair, that is now a garden. So I hear.
The other thing that we're talking about, the 100 hours,
No,
it doesn't...
we're still on points of clarification.
Yeah.
We're not into a debate yet. I realise that some people are new to the committee and don't. Councillor Lloyd, did you indicate to us?
It's just been answered, thank you very much.
Was there somebody else over here? No. Okay. Are there any other points of clarification? No. No, thank you.
Chair.
Anything at the moment?
Chair. Thank you.
Right, just before anything gets moved or seconded, I'm a little bit concerned that the introduction in the thing is different to what's been displayed. So
Yeah.
I need to be absolutely sure, perhaps legally, that we're going to take a decision on what we're taking a decision on what you've put forward up there or what we've got in front of us, because they're different.
Yeah, the opening paragraph in the introduction, it is an error. It's been copied over from the previous committee. There are changes proposed for Sundays and bank holidays, even though it states that there are no changes. The condition is correct as listed on the agenda later on, and that is what we'll be discussing would be that change there. But obviously, if members aren't happy with that, we can.
Okay, so
we can always defer.
I want to get this right, just to make sure that there aren't a challenge somewhere else. So where we get into that sentence in the middle where it says no changes are proposed, blah blah blah.
That's an error.
So is it enough just to remove the no? So which changes are proposed?
Yeah. That would have the
In
correct.
line with that, so we all understand that. Yeah. Legally, are you happy with that?
As
Or?
long as it's, the committee is happy to make the change and go forward and consider based on that, that's fine.
Well, I will ask that because I think it's a genuine error and things happen. But can I be sure that members of the committee are happy for that word to be removed and we know where we're at? Because clearly the applicant has put something in that's different to what's on here. Right. Is anybody unhappy with it?
Residents, they wouldn't have seen it.
Right.
The residents would not have known, Chair, that was Sunday hours.
I can just clarify that for all members of the planning committee. The residents were reconsulted on the planning application. They haven't seen this version of the agenda, and when we reconsulted them, we made it clear what the differences were to the opening hours from the previous time we considered to the current time it's being considered. So the residents are aware.
Right. Here's the question then. what Darren displayed up there, the residents have been consulted on.
Yes.
Right, in that case, if we're, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Joe. Can I just confirm, along similar lines to what you've done, that because of the schedule of conditions, which is what would be
Yeah.
legally attached
Yeah.
to the permission, that does state what they are asking for in the application, and that is what would be
It does.
legally the valid one, and that reflects the introduction we've had,
Yeah.
but not on the paperwork. So that has gone out and been seen by everyone.
We
if
have
they wanted to look at it.
reconsulted all,
So the conditions
residents
are okay.
based on the amended hours as opposed to the old hours that you deferred from the, not last, but the meeting before that.
I just wanted to be absolutely certain that we're doing things right, that's all. In which case, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation which is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed, and that's the important bit of it really. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Any speaker? Yep, Councillor Sargent, I think the names today have to bear with me.
Just to clarify, it does say that the applicant furthermore states that the pharmacy was first opened and there was an NHS 100-hour list, but that doesn't exist anymore, so it doesn't need to be open 100 hours. So that would be, you know, there's no reason for it to extend the hours in that sense. My concern with it would be that, you know, if it's been there since 2017, which I think was said, it's not been open as a pharmacy, what's the reason for that? So I'm quite suspicious of that. And that would be how I would see it. You know, why isn't it being open?
Yeah.
For clarification, the 100-hour contract, as I understand it, applies to a current building elsewhere, I believe it's Edward Street, which is Pharmacy Republic. It's the same people that will be operating the two pharmacies, but the one on Edward Street will close down. So their contract, although it relates to that existing pharmacy, will transfer to the new building. So there is a requirement for them to keep that 100-hour contract with the NHS, but it's just based at a different site. And they will then move from one site to another if they get permission from us to operate those 100 hours.
Well, it says here that the NHS don't operate that system anymore.
No, they don't operate that system anymore, but that contract does still exist with the current pharmacy. They haven't rescinded existing ones, they just don't do them anymore.
Councillor Smith.
Claire's actually just clarified the point I was going to make from the previous meeting. I'd already come to that conclusion, so I don't need to speak.
Councillor Llewellyn-Nash.
Could the legal advisor, is that what Claire's just said, is that, because we're almost talking about transferring something to another, so this application is specifically about Princes Street, isn't it? But you've ended up talking about somewhere in Edward Street now, so is there...
I think it's simply to make reference to the fact that the applicants currently running the premises on Edward Street and have the contract with NHS. And I assume that the contract's just transferring over to the new premises.
The contract, as I understand it, isn't relating to a building. The contract relates to the person, the pharmacist, operating the premises. So it's not that they will...
Yeah. That's what I would...
Yeah, it's the person running it, so it
Rather
moves
than
with the
two
person
separate
to the new
Rather than
site.
the premises.
Councillor Lloyd.
Just a bit of clarification. So the contract that's running currently at Edward Street is going to transfer to the one at Princes Street. Yeah.
If they have
Princes Street currently hasn't been operating as a pharmacy since 2000. Well, since it was given permission. Right. The Edward Street one, is that going to remain a pharmacy as well?
As I understand it, the current pharmacy may shut down, but the use of that building will remain as A1 retail. So another pharmacist or another A1 retail use could move in there with a different contract and different uses and operate from that building.
My concern is, Chair, you know, obviously I weren't on the committee when the first conditions were put on, but the conditions ain't been trialled, so we don't know whether those conditions were effective or those conditions are going to affect local residents, and that's what I'm struggling with, because the pharmacy hasn't been open since 2017. I understand what officers are going to say, but it does put me in a dilemma when I come to vote for this.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I think part of the problem is I haven't heard a reason in planning terms to refuse the application. I can understand residents' concerns. They might be worried about impact on traffic, but we've had nothing from county highways. Might be concerned about potential antisocial behaviour. There's been nothing, I think even once, I think it might have been on one of the previous applications, they were worried about drug use, if that's one of the, if I remember the applications correctly, about congregating around there for potential drug use. But again, there's been no evidence about that, so I haven't, as far as I can see, got a reason for refusal in planning terms. If the applicant was minded to appeal, would we be seen as unreasonable in refusing the planning application? And I think on the basis of the reasons that I've heard potentially for refusal, we would be found to be unreasonable. And also we have to remember that pharmacies are a need within the community. I understand that there is one, but for business need, whatever that may be, they've decided they want to move premises. That's not a planning consideration. We're considering this need. Is there a need for pharmacies within the community? Yes, there is. Do people need to use pharmacies early in the morning, late at night? Yes, they do. You get sick at any time, day or night. And it is an established need for the community. On that basis, and around there are a large number of elderly people and also young children. I know because I have friends and colleagues who live in those areas, and they have young children, they also have elderly relatives, and that is a need for those people too. So unless someone can give me a planning reason for refusal that I think could be justified before an inspector, I don't see any reason for voting against the recommendation.
Thank you. Any other member? I just want to make a quick point about that. I mean, it's not really to do with planning, but I do want to say, because I've been knocking around a while now, is that at one point there used to be consultation with local members and with residents from people like the Community Health Council and stuff, and they had to, that consultation had to come in and basically preventing an oversupply of pharmacies and things like that, and it's kind of, that's increased and now it's going back the other way. And sometimes that would have prevented things from coming to this stage of the planning process, you know, because it would have been dealt with in another way. But we're wherever we are with it. Okay, anything else, Darren?
Nothing to come back on, Chair.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, the recommendation which is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed on the agenda. All those in favour of that? And against? And sorry. And abstentions. Okay, so that's approved. Yeah, we got that.
Oh, great.
The application's approved.
Thanks, Alex.
If we can move on to back to item number 1 then, which is Borough Golf Centre. Oh, sorry, have I?
He arrived after.
It was, yeah.
He arrived after the debate had started.
He'll be happy about that.
Yeah.
application is for the approval of reserved matters relating to the previous outline for up to 300 houses on land at the Plough Hill Golf Centre on Plough Hill Road, Nuneaton. The outline permission was approved with access considered, but all of the matters were reserved and are being applied for now. The site is located off Plough Hill Road in Gallicom and Nuneaton. The land comprises a number of arable fields and is mostly open with some small structures relating to the previous golf centre use. Plough Hill Road forms the western boundary for the arable fields and part of the golf centre. Where the parcel of arable fields is set back from Plough Hill Road, its western boundaries are formed by mature hedgerows and dense vegetation. The eastern boundary of these fields is defined by the local wildlife site, Anthony Mineral Line / the Shuntings, and the northern and southern boundaries of the land are bordered by hedgerows. An existing stream flows along part of the southern boundary of the golf centre's driving range and crosses into the golf course. A small residential group of properties is to the west of the golf centre and adjoins the northern end of the arable fields. The topography of the site is generally flat to the south, rising steadily north, with the highest point present in the northern segment of the fields. The key issues to consider here are each of the reserved matters, and these are appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, along with any other material considerations. These will be dealt with in turn as they appear in the printed agenda. Firstly, turning to appearance, the site is a large development area of some 300 homes, which will adequately create its own character. The materials will be chosen so as to reflect the local character and wider materials used locally. Shown here are some of the house types being applied for. There are many more, but these are printed in the agenda. These include gabled roofs finished in tiles, with a mixture of brick, tile hanging on fronts, and render, making up the elevation of materials. Details such as string courses, headers, sills, and some small bay windows will also add interest to the facades. Here are some more of the house types applied for. These again feature a mixture of materials and also include some hipped roofs to add variation to the house types across the whole site. Again, details such as headers, sills over openings, string courses, some low eaves and decorative brickwork has all been included, all of which help to add variation to the design and add interest to the new properties. I'll come back to those in a moment. In regard to landscaping, this relates to the treatment of both public and private space and details how such space will be landscaped with trees, plants and other vegetation. The master landscaping plans show the exact plant types and their placements and agrees the position and detail of the hard landscaping, such as cycleways, footways, pedestrian footpaths and so on. There has been no objection from the MBBC Parks team and therefore the proposed landscaping is considered acceptable. The site is to be developed with a mixture of residential properties with 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties all proposed. There are 225 open market houses comprising 12 two-bedroom homes, 133 three-bedroom homes and 80 four-bedroom properties. There are also 75 affordable properties which are to be a mixture of bedroom sizes, which are to be in 3 main areas shown blue on this plan. The MBBC housing team have no objection to this. The layout complies with guidance set out in the Residential Design Guide 2004 in relation to distance separation standards and residential amenity. The properties are mostly 2-storey with some 2.5-storey houses with rooms in the roof space. The 2.5-storey properties all have Velux windows serving non-habitable rooms to the rear and habitable Velux windows to the front. The dwellings are not out of scale with their surroundings, particularly taking into account the new developments around the site to the south, which is currently being developed by Taylor Wimpey. In regard to other matters, the flood risk team originally objected to the proposal, but as members will see from the addendum, this has now been removed. There are conditions attached to the outline permission which deal with flood risk and drainage, and as such, it is considered that this is acceptable to cover any impact on flood risk. In conclusion, the reserved matters are deemed acceptable and are therefore recommended for approval.
Okay, thank you. So to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation which is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed? That's seconded. Thank you. Any member? Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Do you mind if I could just ask Darren a point of clarification? On the blue, if you can go back to the last slide.
Yeah, the layout slide.
Yes,
That
yeah.
one, yeah.
The houses highlighted in blue, did you say they were affordable?
They're the ones that are proposed to be affordable, yeah.
Okay, right. I was always under the impression, and I am new to planning, so I was always under the impression that for new estates, the affordable housing has to be scattered equally, if you get what I mean, around the site and not kind of like put into one specific area of the estate. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
Or is that optional for...
So it's generally called sort of pepper potting, that sort of thing, where they're dotted throughout the site. A lot of registered social landlords who take up affordable housing struggle to maintain properties when they're all dotted around. So for convenience, they're generally grouped in smaller groups. In this case, there's three sort of medium groups, with the smaller one in the centre, the larger one to the north, and then the larger one to the south. We've double checked with the housing team and they're happy with this. Obviously, you could have it more spread out, but in general, the social landlords do sort of struggle with that from a maintenance point of view. So that tends to be why they're grouped in smaller groups now.
Thank you,
That answers your question.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. It's following on in the same theme because, and I understand that this is subjective when it comes to whether you consider it pepper potted enough or not when we're looking at layout, but I don't really consider that to be sufficiently laid out in my view. I accept there's a distinct one at the bottom. I suppose it's difficult to call it the bottom right with it being over that way, but what Darren described as the middle one, to me, is merging into the top one. It's almost as if it's a continuation of it. Now, I could understand, and this is supposed to be 75 houses, so it's not an insignificant amount of properties, and I understand the point that you've got to balance pepper potting and maintenance, but I think you could sufficiently get away with moving the middle clump of houses somewhere else out over towards the other side. Why should there be no affordable or social housing over towards the extreme right-hand side of that layout? Is it because they think that it's not viable? Nothing's been mentioned about that, but in my view that is not sufficiently pepper potted. So I will vote against it on that basis, because I don't see it as three clumps. I see it as one at the bottom and one at the top. That's not sufficiently spaced out in my view. Subjective, I know, but that's my view.
Thank you. I think I saw somebody over there. Somebody on this side had their hand up? No, okay. Councillor Sargent.
I was sort of really going to back up what Councillor Wilson said. It does appear that there's a clump of, well, on the top of that plan, sort of blue, and it, you know, if you're going to, you know, I understand the maintenance side of it, but then the other side of it is I thought the whole point of it is that you did spread them around and not just clump them all together.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Longdon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just grateful that there are that many affordable properties. I agree with the arguments about pepper potting, but the fact is that the developer has chosen that area, and I don't want to put the plan in jeopardy just because we might think that it needs to be more spread out. There are properties there, they've met their obligation, and as far as it goes, I might not like it particularly too much, but at the end of the day, I have to bite my tongue sometimes, and we just have to accept these things. And if you look at that reasoning about not pepper potting enough for the grounds of rejection, I don't think we'll get that past our own officers, let alone the Secretary of State, if it goes to appeal. So we stand to lose on that argument straight away. So the whole issue for me is the fact that they are there, and they're being identified. And as it goes, I'm not overly keen on the whole thing, but at the end of the day, it is what it is, and we have to be mindful of where we're going with it. And if we get to a point where we do refuse it on potentially spurious grounds, then we're going to get hammered and the council taxpayers are going to have to pick the bill up. So at the end of the day, I'm going to vote for it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor
Chairman, I think I'm inclined to support what Councillor Longden has said, that if housing are satisfied with it, and there are people who are used to maintaining properties and so on, they appreciate, I think, possibly a little more than even the developers, whether it's a site that we've got to attract social housing in there, and we've got to attract the housing associations to want to take on the buildings and provide a service effectively in place of what we can or cannot afford. So I'd be inclined to accept it. A recent experience with a site at Bulkington, which I think Councillor Smith was had a consultation on, they were describing how if you put your hand on the map, on the layout, and each time you put your hand on that particular part, it depends on scale of course, but if you can then locate everywhere on the site where through your hand outline is, if there are affordable housing in that scope, then that is a reasonable distribution. Now that's possibly just as subjective as any other in whether it's suitably pepper potted. But unless someone can argue that they are being located in unsuitable or less than acceptable locations, for instance, on a certain site at the back on Coventry Road in Bulkington, there was a set of houses, affordable houses, that were right up against the railway. You know, and it was obviously somewhere where that is less acceptable than the rest of the site that was being planned. And the developer there refused to change anything, and we refused it twice. He never came back and he didn't appeal, but assuming it's a bloke. But it does strike me that it is subjective, and if housing are accepting it, I think that's a good reason for us to accept that the consultations have been proper and they've considered the conditions around the support for those houses.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really balanced one myself because of those points. And certainly the example you've given is one of the reasons why this planning committee over the recent years has been keen on the pepper potting idea, so there's proper social inclusion, people are mixed together, you're not identified by the type of housing that you're even in. I mean, I can't tell off what I've got in front of me, to be honest, on whether the social housing part of it is a different type of housing to the private stuff, but that obviously that's not a concern. And as you say, housing's gone into it. There's good things on this. I mean, there's some design aspects of it, like lintels and sills. There's some relief work onto the front of some of the properties, and you know, so there's that issue to be balanced up about, is it pepper potted enough? I think we can all understand why any social housing provider would want them clumped together for ease of maintenance. I guess that isn't a massive concern for us, but it might be if it prevents us getting that social housing in place. So it's kind of that layout and the pepper potting issue against the benefits that people need to come to. Right, I don't think there was anybody else. The The recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed. That has been moved and seconded. All those in favour of that? And against? That's approved. I think that's everything, isn't it? Don't have any items of urgent business, so thank you for your attendance and declare the meeting closed.